This is Becoming a Professional Bass Player. My name's Deborah and this is the video journal of my career transition. So I'm going to talk to you today about some creative problem solving. Again, this is not a series of videos about how I'm doing this so brilliantly. I'm just sharing with you things that have worked for me and sometimes things that don't work. And I've had 3 problems lately and I've managed to solve them all together. So I thought that might be quite useful to share. So the first issue that I've had is that I'm struggling to find the time to get to grips with Logic Pro. It looks quite scary to me who doesn't do sound engineering or recording at all at the moment. And it's hard to sit down doing something that you find intimidating. It's, there's that resistance to making time for that. I always make time for something else and not for that. I learn best from a person. So I've got to try and work out a way of learning Logic Pro software and perhaps find someone to teach me rather than YouTube videos or on my own. The next issue I was worried about was I've got to get everybody in the bands together to record the soundtrack for the promotional reels that we're making. We will capture sound on the day, but it's also useful to have a proper studio recording of what you sound like. I need that. And then the last thing I've been thinking about is, oh gosh, what's going to happen if someone's sick on the day and I haven't got time to get a dep in? How am I going to cover that? And these 3 problems were sort of, rolling around my mind for about 2 weeks. And then I woke up the other day and something crystallized for me and I had what I think is a solution. So I've got to record a master audio. And if I go along to the recording of that, if I find someone to record that for me that uses Logic Pro, as part of the price to do that for me, I'm going to ask them to let me sit in and watch how they layer up the stems. Each line that you put in is called a stem. So the drum stem, the bass stem, the guitar stem, trumpet, trombone, they're all layered up like stems in a track, and then you get the full thing. So if I sit in on that process, I can watch and they can teach me a little bit, just the basics of how they put a track together stem by stem in the studio. That also solves the problem for me of how I get everybody together, because I'm thinking 9 people for Divine Funk, 5. It was hard enough with 5 of us for a function band I'm in called Blue Skies. How am I going to manage it? There's 6 people in Simply Mick. It's a lot to organise. It's a lot of people's time, and then if someone can't make it on the day, that's really difficult. However, if I get them to record at home on their software and send in their stem, I'll have all the stems and I can add them together in the studio with the sound engineer and make a track. So that solved 2 things. So that's 2 solutions together. And then thirdly, I was at my monthly bass club this week and I was listening to a story about how one bassist was really poorly and she had to ring up another bassist and see if she could come down to London to cover for her in a West End show. And thankfully, even though it was just a couple of hours to spare, it all went well. But I said to my colleague at the meeting, I said, well, what would have happened if, you just got poorly, I don't know, or had an accident 10 minutes before you were due to go on? What would have happened? And she talked through some of the scenarios and then she said, well, in the very worst case, if they really couldn't get anyone and they have a big long list of deps that they can ring at last minute, then the sound engineers would have all the individual stems of the orchestra in a West End show. And in the second worst case scenario, you unmute the bass stem and you have someone who can't play the bass just standing there miming, but the bass is coming out over the stereo that my colleague had pre-recorded. And in the very worst case scenario, you don't have anyone there, but you've unmuted the bass line. And so the bass will play out over the stereo in time with the rest of the orchestra because they're all in time with that anyway. And I thought, right, so if I use this method then I have learnt how to use Logic Pro. I've created an audio track for my promotional reel, and I've got some kind of insurance if one of my musicians doesn't turn up, doesn't make it on the night for whatever reason. So I was really pleased with that. So I thought I'd share it. And obviously, as this diary goes on, you'll get to see whether I manage to make that solution work. Who knows? Thanks for listening.